the words apply to me. There are so many wonderful devotees on here, Adi Purusha Prabhu and Shikshashtaka Prabhu and Brajarani and Andrea and so many. If I don't name you, it doesn't mean I don't think you're wonderful. So please welcome and bless me that I can speak something that is pleasing to the hearts of the Vaishnavas and the Supreme Lords Nityananda Ram and Gauranga Mahaprabhu and Radha Murlidhar, of course. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We'll start with brief invocation prayers. What happened to my share? Hold on. Can you see it? Yeah. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunivadi Paschati Deshtanane Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanayataya Cha Jagatitaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhupyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shri Gadadhar Shrivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Nitai Gaura. So today's verse is Srimad Bhagavatam 10th canto, 1st chapter, verse number 43. The purport is very long, so with the Vaishnava's permission, I'm going to read the Sanskrit, the translation, and then make 5 points from the verse, from the purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. And then we will talk about Lord Nityananda, whose appearance day is today. Jyotir yathaiva dakaparthi vishvadaha samira veganugatam vibhavyate evam swamaya rachiteshva asau puman Guneshu raganugato vimuyati. So this is Vasudev, the father of Krishna, continuing his preaching to the evil Kamsa, who's grabbed the hair of Devaki, as Adi Purusha Prabhu in yesterday's class reminded everyone, that he's speaking this high philosophy. In the meantime, his newlywed wife, she's sitting under the grasp of her own brother who's about to decapitate her with his sharp sword. So today's translation, today's verse says, when the luminaries in the sky, such as the moon, the sun, and the stars, are reflected in liquids like oil or water, they appear to be of different shapes, sometimes round, sometimes long, and so on, because of the movements of the wind. Similarly, when the living entity, the soul, is absorbed in materialistic thoughts, he accepts various manifestations as his own identity because of ignorance. In other words, one is bewildered by mental concoctions because of agitation from the material modes of nature. So I would highly recommend and request everyone to read the purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada on their own. It's a really wonderful purport. And if it was not Nityananda Prabhu's appearance day today, I would have gone through the purport and we would have discussed each of it. But I do want to discuss, because the purport is so punchy, so I do want to discuss 5 points from there. So the first point Srila Prabhupada makes in his purport is the fundamental philosophy of we are not this body. And Srila Prabhupada illustrates that, points to the fact that just as the moon and the sun and the stars reflect in liquids like oil or water, and then when the wind blows, they appear to be of different shapes. Sometimes they look oblong, sometimes round, sometimes long, and so on. Similarly, the soul, we know from Bhagavad Gita, absolutely first teaching of Krishna, that we are not this body, we are the spirit soul. So that's the first point that Srila Prabhupada makes in his powerful purport. The second point, and Srila Prabhupada spends quite a bit of time on this one, is formlessness. So, and he makes the point that the Lord is not formless, but he has no material form. So when the scriptures say he is nirguna, guna means quality and or attribute, and nir means no. So when the scriptures say Krishna is nirguna, it does not mean he is formless. They mean that he has no material form. Yesterday, we had this wonderful festival organized by Karuna Nimai Prabhu, Tulsi Rani Devi, and so many others who worked on it. Julia at the Bhakti Center, who lives there. And so many other people took part in that. Kula Pradeepa Prabhu. And at the festival, there were quite a lot of people. And one person that our Godrum Pran Prabhu from the Harinam party, he was on the Harinam as usual every day. And he saw a girl standing there watching them with some interest, and he connected with her. And he invited her to the festival, and she walked in off the street. And she was of a faith that absolutely abhors and absolutely rejects the worship of any form whatsoever. And surprisingly, she was there from 4 p.m. when the festival started with Godrum Pran's Kirtan. And then I gave a talk on Lord Nityananda. It was a very philosophical talk, much more than the pastimes we're going to talk about today. And then she sat through the bhajans, the arti, and the prasadam, and I connected with her afterwards. And she stayed from 4 to 10. I mean, talk about getting Lord Nityananda's mercy. But her question to me was, because she wanted to talk to me afterwards, her first question to me was, why do you worship idols? And because she saw Radha Murlidhar and Sri Gaurachandra on the altar. And I explained to her that if I worship this cup that, she was sitting next to, then that's an idol, because that's not an authorized representation of God. And what we worship is deities. And I went through how the Lord can take any form, and he appears in this deity form simply so that we can offer him worship and exchange love with him. And that these deities are not actually statues, they're definitely not idols, and they're actually and factually the Supreme Lord himself. And I asked her, do you think Allah is prohibited from taking form? Is it impossible for him? And she said, no, nothing is impossible for Allah. I said, so that is the exact point, that in our Shastras, it's given very clearly what is a deity form, how to invite the Lord into the deity form. And then when we worship, the deity is actually reciprocating with each worshiper in the way that the worshiper approaches the deity. And then I gave her a story that I had heard early on in my Krishna consciousness, which really blew my mind. And I'm hoping it'll blow your mind also. So this was in my first temple in Phoenix, Arizona. And we had just finished a gorgeous festival of Janmashtami, and the deities had been fed all day, like 108 preparations. And then the next day, the head pujari comes out, and he had a big O on his face, like his lips had formed a big O. And he came out and he said, not a single dress is fitting the deities today. And I gave her that example, that if the Lord if that was just an idol or a statue, then the same exact dress should fit every day. The dresses are not washed in water. They're heavy, material and gold embroidery and so on and so forth, metal embroidery. And so it should right away go on to the deity. But the fact is that because the Lord is reciprocating with the devotees' offerings, after festival days, pujaris have told me, and this has happened since too, that sometimes the same dress that has fitted tens of times in the past many years, that day will not fit, and they have to try 10, 15 outfits before they find something that fits. So Krishna actually puts on weight after we feed him 108 preparations, which shows you that he's not a statue. He's factually the son of Maharaj Nanda standing on the altar. So Srila Prabhupada makes the point that the Lord does not have material form. He's definitely not formless, but Krishna's form does not change. When he appears, he might appear in a different avatar, like Lord Nrsimhadev does not look the same as our beautiful Radha Murlidhar. But Lord Nrsimhadev appears in his own original form in the spiritual world. It's not like he's changed, the form has changed because of some material activities that the Lord has done in the past. It's not like that. And Srila Prabhupada also makes the point that the living entity's form changes based on his or her desires and activities in this lifetime. So the third point I wanted to make from this purport is it takes many lifetimes to come to Krishna consciousness and to become joyfully situated in the original position of service to Krishna. That is every single living entity's constitutional position. Lord Chaitanya says, he's told us, Jivera Swarupa Hoy, Krishnira Nityadas, that every jiva, the constitutional position is that we are the eternal servants of Krishna. And so it takes many lifetimes. And when I read that in the purport, as Srila Prabhupada's purports have a way of doing, it like set off a mini bomb in my mind. I was thinking to myself, like the years that I've spent in my life, looking back, how seriously have I taken to Krishna consciousness? And sadly, the answer is not as much as I should have. And I'm taking a chance that, I have many more years and I'll become serious. And maybe, death might come tomorrow, or it might come, in 10 years' time, or 15 or 30 years' time. But the point is, can I become serious in my Krishna consciousness and completely devote myself to this process? Because it does take lifetimes and lifetimes, trillions of lifetimes to come to the process of accepting Krishna as the Supreme Lord and worshiping him. And we don't want to take chances in our own life that, maybe next life we'll be born in a yogi's family or a rich family, as Krishna promises in chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, and continue our journey. Because in every material form that the living entity takes, he or she goes through their own challenges, own situations, and their own attractions to material energy. So it is dangerous not to fully devote ourselves to Krishna consciousness. I'm preaching to my own mind. Then Srila Prabhupada makes the point, those who pursue the impersonal path of realization, Brahman realization, they struggle. And Srila Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita 12.5, where Krishna himself tells Arjuna that this path is very difficult for those who are on the path of impersonal realization. It takes them a long, long, long time to come to the point of Krishna consciousness. So, yes, the Bhagavatam tells us that Krishna can be realized in 3 different forms, as the impersonal Brahman, the effulgence of his body, as the supersoul within the heart, and as Supreme Bhagavan, or the personal form of the Lord, Krishna himself. And that the form of the Lord is the supreme, and that the other 2 come from that form. And so Srila Prabhupada is making that point. And the final point in the purport is, as long as the living entity is entangled in fruitive activities and thoughts, he or she will receive a particular type of material body to endure 3 kinds of suffering. And those 3 kinds are, own body and mind, suffering imposed by one's own body and mind, suffering imposed by other living entities, and suffering imposed by material nature. And all this is meant to show us that the material world is not our permanent residence. Do not get comfortable here. There is no situation in the material world that is our home. So let me pause before I go into Nityananda Katha and see if there are any questions, comments, or corrections.
I wanted to quickly share, Yasoda Dulal Prabhu, you were talking about the temporary nature of this life, and that not only that applies to us, but also to other devotees that we may have, I don't know, some envy towards or something. Because I had a devotee and he got successful and maybe I was envious. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that's the case. But I was thinking, yeah, I don't want to think about him. He's showing off his wealth and opulence and things. And then Chinmay Radha was talking. We talked the other day, and she said, "Do you remember that devotee that did so and so?" And I said, "Yeah. But what about him?" And she said, "He left his body." I was like, "Wow!" And I immediately realized that, yeah, I can leave this body, but also the people that I have animosity towards, the devotees that have bad feelings towards, they can do that too. So before it's too late, let me apologize. Let me pray to Krishna to remove these feelings from my heart, this unhealthy envy to the devotees. Just wanted to share that. So not only we're immortal, but are the devotees too. So let's make peace, apologize, love each other. Peace, love.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing that understanding. It's muted.
You might have another device in your room that is also on.
They're taking care of it.
Akashvani.
Welcome to the Matrix.
Okay, now you can hear me. Oh gosh.
No, it's still echoing.
Okay. Yeah, that story about the girl who came to the festival and what her response was. We met the district attorney from Buffalo, New York. Somebody else talking here. We met the district attorney from Buffalo, New York, and he told us that he went, when he was a lawyer, he was in the Los Angeles airport and he got the Krishna book from Yogya Purush Prabhu, right? And he said, and I had it for a few years and I started to read it. Now I'm trained in criminal law. And as I read this part of the Bhagavatam that you were reading about today, all I could think was criminal, 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 criminal. This Krishna is a criminal. First of all, premeditated murder, that's crime. You can't just kill somebody. He came here from someplace else to kill Kamsa, right? Now that's crossing state lines. That's also criminal. He didn't know where he came from. And he said, then he's colluding, this Vasudev, he's cooperating. It's conspiracy to murder. It's not just one person. He's cooperating and facilitating the murder of Kamsa. And then there's child abuse. They're considering murdering these children. That's criminal. And he's, his whole thing, I'm going to leave it for you to answer him, And he said, and then what else did he do that was criminal? He's going to kill his sister. Okay, that's criminal. Then justifying the fact that under these circumstances, this person is cruel, demoniac, and hateful. And, so he made a very strong case. The Krishna and the devotees, then he lied. He told Kamsa he was going to give him the children, and then we found out later that he didn't. And then the Krishna came, and he said he lied. He colluded to kill, and then he actually killed this guy, and that's all criminal. So what do you say to somebody who says like that? Because he's the district. So I'm a district attorney, Buffalo.
Yeah. Few things.
Respond to it?
Sure. And I'll answer briefly. Probably if I had 15, 20 minutes, I would sit down with him and answer him much more detailed manner. But I do want to get into some Nityananda Katha. So how I would answer it is to say Krishna reciprocates in the way that a living entity approaches him. And so if I approach Krishna to want to murder him, Hare Krishna, I hope and pray it never happens. Like I never want to do that. But if I approach him with that mentality, then Krishna will approach me with that mentality that he wants to, get rid of me. And no one can really kill Krishna. So Krishna is the Supreme Lord. The other thing is, if I want to approach Krishna with the mentality of cheating him, then Krishna is the biggest cheater. Who can cheat Krishna, right? He cheats living entities of their predetermined material illusions. And he shows them again and again that you're just dashing your head against the wall. Don't waste your time. But if Krishna is approached with love, if I approach him with a desire to really serve him and love him, he's the most lovable person. And actually, the world's religions, including the tradition I was born in, Hinduism, typically approach the Lord as a provider and as a wish fulfiller, or almost like a food server or a waiter. That, Lord, please give me this. Lord, please give me that. And the Lord does reciprocate, because he's very kind and he takes care of every living entity. But if I approach him that, Krishna, I really want to serve you, and I'm struggling because I'm very fallen, but somehow or the other help me, Krishna will not only provide what I need for my material maintenance, but he will go beyond and offer his heart to me, which is something which is absolutely unique in this tradition of Bhakti Yoga.
So it's all justified.
It's totally justified.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So nowhere is it written that someone should accept that, yes, let's accept murder from the other person and let's, not do anything about it. Krishna came to dispense justice. But even more than that, he came to engladden the hearts of the devotees by performing his pastimes. So speaking of pastimes, yesterday in the class at the Bhakti Center, I spent a lot of time on the philosophy of Lord Nityananda. And it's essential, because sometimes if we find someone is acting very kindly to us and in a particularly merciful way, we might take them cheaply, that maybe this person is weak and they're currying favor with us. Or maybe they have nothing better. They have like a popularity disease that if I don't act like this, then, people won't like me. And, being disliked is really a problem for me. And so it is essential when we approach any kind of appearance day to really understand the tattva, the philosophy behind that personality, so that when we hear about his or her pastimes, that great person's pastimes, we are actually enabled to understand their glories and then take whatever they're doing in a way that we can actually take to heart and implement in our own lives with the right mood. So I'm going to narrate a few pastimes and then weave in the philosophy into that. So let's first talk about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's feelings about Nityananda. So at one time, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was with his devotees, and he actually, hey, Anand Bihari Prabhu, before I get into this, my screen seems stuck. Are you seeing? No? Okay, so maybe
your lips are moving. All good.
Okay, so the screen is not stuck. Okay, very good. Let me just maybe switch to gallery view, and yeah, that's fine. Thank you. So one day, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was with his devotees, and he had a piece of cloth, a loin cloth in his hands. Now, a loin cloth is basically the underwear that is worn by, by monks and, people who wear dhotis, constantly and nothing else. Like they don't wear pants and things like that. So it's not exactly something that you think of as, very approachable, or, it's not like a shirt or a t-shirt or something, right? And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took this kopin that was Nityananda Prabhu's kopin, and he tore a piece of it, a large piece of it, and put it around his head as a turban. And then he cut pieces of it and he handed it to all the devotees who were around him. And the significance of that is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was declaring, and he said as much. He said that Nityananda is such a renounced person. He's such a renounced, he didn't say Supreme Lord, but he said he's so renounced that it's based completely on his pure love for Krishna and his compassion for all living beings. And then Lord Chaitanya added something very significant. He said, anyone who worships and honors Nityananda Prabhu will be the recipient of my full mercy and will be free forever from the sufferings of material existence. That sounds like a pretty good idea for us, isn't it? Pretty good incentive for us to worship Lord Nityananda. The second incident that displays what Lord Chaitanya felt about Lord Nityananda is, it happened in Srivas Thakur's house. So this was after Nityananda had arrived in Navadvip. So Lord Chaitanya had already come back from Gaya. This was around his own age 20. And Nityananda had started living in Srivas Pandit's house. And so one day Lord Chaitanya went around to his house and he said, "Hey Srivas, you are such an exalted Brahmin, but you harbor this Nityananda in your house. You don't even know where he's come from. You don't know his caste. You don't know his purity. He acts in very contrary ways, because Nityananda is described as an avadut, which means he's transcendental to rules and regulations, because Nityananda is the Supreme Lord himself. He is directly Balaram. He's not an expansion. He's not a representation. He is Lord Balarama himself, who is the first expansion of Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada describes, and the Shastras describe, that Balaram is non-different from Krishna. He differs only in form and in mood. So the mood is that he is eternally in service to the Supreme Lord Krishna. And the form, of course, is he's of a whitish complexion, spring cloud, versus Krishna, who's of a dark complexion, like a monsoon cloud. So Lord Chaitanya continued. He said, this Nityananda, you should not harbor people like this in your home. You'll lose your caste. And what will people say? You should drive him away from your home. Srivas Pandit laughed because he knew Lord Chaitanya was testing him. He said, "Why are you doing this to me, Mahaprabhu?" And well, he said, at that time he was not yet Mahaprabhu. He said, "Nimai, why are you doing this to me?" He said, "You know very well that Nityananda is the supreme person." And he said, "Nityananda is my life and soul. No matter what he does, where he's from, what kind of external behavior he displays," he said, "I will never give up his association, and I will never give up worshiping him and serving him to the best of my capability." When Lord Chaitanya, in fact, Srivas went ahead and added one other thing. Even if I were to see Nityananda coming out of a wine shop or marrying a girl from the Yavana or Malecha category of people, he said, he would still be my worshipable Lord. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard this, he roared with ecstasy. And he said, "Srivas, you have understood my heart completely." He said, "Anyone who worships my Nityananda will forever obtain my mercy." He said, even if the goddess of fortune has to go begging from door to door to get food grains and maintenance for you, you and your family will never be in poverty because you worship Nityananda. And then the second thing that he said, because you worship Nityananda and revere him so much, not only you, but every single living entity in your household, including the cats and the dogs and the cows that you have, all of them will get my full mercy and will get pure devotional service for me. So this was Lord Chaitanya's expression of his love and his feelings for Lord Nityananda. These are just two examples. There were many examples like this. So now another thing that I wanted to share, another quality of Nityananda, is typically when we see Godhead coming, we expect miracles, we expect all kinds of like Krishna lifting Govardhan hill on his left little finger, right? Which is something impossible for any ordinary living entity to do. But Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda came as their own devotees. They did not ostensibly, from an external point of view, come as Godhead. But yet, just like you cannot hide the sun under a bushel, right, under a little bucket, you cannot hide the sun under a bushel. How can you hide the fact that Nityananda is Lord Balarama himself and that Gauranga is Lord Krishna himself in a different form? So one day, Nityananda is staying at Srivas's house. Srivas's wife, Malini Devi, she every day would do puja. And, in puja, there is paraphernalia. I see Namras Prabhu and Gaurakumar Prabhu and others here, Bhakti Center pujaris. That there is puja paraphernalia. And there's a particular bowl that is kept for ghee. And so one day she was carrying that bowl into the courtyard, and a crow came. And the crow swooped down, picked up the bowl of ghee, and flew away to his nest. Malini was extremely disturbed, and she said, hi, this bowl is meant for Krishna. Now you've contaminated it. And now I don't even have a bowl, because, they were not rich people. And this was a nice bowl that was kept for Krishna's worship. What will I do? Nityananda was nearby. He said, why are you so disturbed, mother? And she narrated what happened. She said, let me call the crow back. And so Nityananda called the crow back. Hey, crow, come back right here. And so the crow flew back, and he said, go get that bowl back. It does not belong to you. It belongs to Malini, and I'm going to give it back to her, and she's going to use it after she cleans it again and use it for worship of Krishna. Chaitanya Bhagavat describes that Nityananda, being Lord Balarama himself, he's the origin of the super soul within every living entity's heart. So super soul is Kshirodakshai Vishnu, who is an expansion of an expansion of an expansion of an expansion of Lord Balarama. And so the crow, hearing Nityananda's order, immediately flew to his nest and brought back the bowl of ghee that was stolen by him. And he gave it to Malini. Nityananda said, now, decontaminate it, clean it properly, and you can use it. And Malini, she said, she looked at him. She had awareness of Nityananda's divinity. And she said, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead yourself. This is not at all wonderful for you. You are the super soul in everyone's heart. You hold aloft the millions and trillions of universes on your hoods in your form as Shesha, and you don't even feel their burden. They feel like mustard seeds on your hoods. So what is the greatness that you asked that crow to return the bowl of ghee that I've used? That is very insignificant, but still you're showing that you are the super soul in everyone's heart. So I see a question from, and it says Will's iPhone. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Hare Bo.
Hare Krishna.
It's actually not a question. I got to go bring my children to school, so I have to leave. But before I leave, I just want to say thank you so much for a wonderful class.
Thank
and
you.
I want to show you my altar. Yeah?
Oh, Nitai Gaura, Jai Jai. Beautiful.
You were the first person when I came back to Krishna consciousness that I met who introduced me to Adi Purusha. And I just want to thank Krishna for that, because it was because of that moment that I continue to serve in feeding the homeless and in service.
Jai.
And I thank Krishna so much for allowing you to come in my path and bringing, thank you. Thank you, Krishna.
Thank you so much. Adi Purush Prabhu is a great soul. Anyone who comes into contact with him, because he carries Prabhupada and Krishna in his heart, everyone is influenced favorably by that. So thank you.
Happy Valentine's Day. Have a beautiful day.
Yes. Worship your beautiful Valentine, Nityananda Prabhu. Yes. Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
So then, some other divine manifestations that Nityananda Prabhu showed. So after Lord Chaitanya took sannyas, he went to Jagannath Puri. And then for the first 2 years after he went to Puri, he went on a tour of South India. And then Nityananda stayed in Puri. And then when Mahaprabhu came back, he again traveled, he went to Vrindavan, he came back. Nityananda stayed with Mahaprabhu for 6 years in Jagannath Puri. So at that time, Mahaprabhu was 30 and Nityananda was 42. And Mahaprabhu asked Nityananda Prabhu to go back to Bengal and share the message of Krishna consciousness with everyone. He said, I'm a sannyasi and I'm bound by the rules and regulations of the life that I've chosen, the life of renunciation. But I want you to get married, and I want you to show how grihastas can share Krishna consciousness on a wide scale and utilize what Krishna has given them to serve Krishna. And so he ordered him to go to Bengal, and he said, every year the devotees of Bengal will come to visit me for Rath Yatra and then stay for 4 months during Chaturmasya, but I want you to stay in Bengal. And by this, Mahaprabhu was demonstrating, Srila Prabhupada writes, that Mahaprabhu was demonstrating the principle that in the service of the Lord, in the service of the spiritual master, it is more important to do the service than to rush to be personally here or there with the Guru. Of course, being with the Guru is very important because the Vapu, the body of the Guru, is a divine body, and we want to associate with that, with the Guru in that capacity, serve him, and be with other God family, God sisters, God brothers. But if the instruction is do this service and it means being away, then doing that service is far higher. And Srila Prabhupada actually writes, much more important than being in Vrindavan for the sake of one's own emancipation is to take Vrindavan outside of Vrindavan and share Krishna consciousness with the whole world so that Vrindavan can be established in the hearts of other living entities. So Nityananda Prabhu took this order on his head, and for the next 18 years that Mahaprabhu was on the planet, because Mahaprabhu left the planet from our manifest gaze at the age of 48, his 48. And so he gave this instruction to Nityananda when he was 30. So for the next 18 years, Nityananda saw Mahaprabhu only once in person when he came back to Puri once. And every year the devotees would come back for Rath Yatra, but not Nityananda. So on the way back, from Puri to Bengal, the kirtan that happened, because Nityananda went with some of his most intimate associates. Abhiram Thakur was there, Gadadhar Das was there. And so the kirtan is described in Chaitanya Bhagavat. And when you read that kirtan, your heart will just melt and you will hanker to be in kirtans like that. And that hankering will bring us even closer to Gaur Nitai, because Krishna, as I mentioned earlier in response to Adipurusha Prabhu's question, Krishna reciprocates with the desires we have, and the spiritual desires Krishna will fulfill. So if we hanker for something spiritual, it will never go unfulfilled. So they were on the way, and obviously they were walking. It's a distance of several hundred kilometers. And on the way, they were chanting kirtan. And so it's described that Abhiram Thakur, he was Sridama in Krishna Lila. He would stand in the middle of the road, the pathway, and for 9 hours, he would stand in a threefold bending form with a flute in his hand and just be in stunned ecstasy. Gadadhar Das would be in the mood of a gopi. And then the kirtans would take place. Those kirtans were so spectacular that the Nityananda would glance at each of the devotees who were dancing in kirtan with him. And each living entity would completely lose their external consciousness. Some would run up a tree, a tall tree that was there, and they would start climbing it. This is in the middle of chanting Hare Krishna. They would start climbing it, and then they would go out onto the branches. And then not just the branches, they would go out onto the ends of the branches, the leaves, and they would stand there and they would dance up and down while the kirtan was going on for hours at a time. Now, normally on a leaf, other than a tiny little bird, no other living entity can be sustained on the leaf. But this is Nityananda Prabhu's potency, because Nityananda is the Supreme Lord. What can he not do? And so the devotees would be standing and they would be dancing, and it's described. See, this is inconceivable for our material minds, but their kirtans lasted 1 day of Brahma, but yet in a few weeks, they were in Raghava Pandit's house in Bengal. So it's inconceivable, because time, Nityananda is the controller of time. Everything emanates from the spiritual worlds, and the material worlds emanate from Nityananda, because he's Balaram, he's the original Mula Sankarshan. So what can he not do? So this is inconceivable to us. We hear these statements, we read this, and we say, okay, well, I don't grasp it, but I accept it, and I want to be in that kirtan someday with you, Nityananda. So And I know that the class is playing in front of Radha Muralidhar and Sri Gaurachandra Mahaprabhu and Varan Nrsimhadev on the altar. So I'm registering my desire to officially be in that Kirtan of Gaur Nitai, and especially Nityananda Prabhu's Kirtan. So hopefully someday my desire will be fulfilled. So then Nityananda comes to, along with his party, comes to Raghava Pandit's house. And Raghava Pandit, he's in Panihati, as we know. And he welcomes the party, and they stay there for 3 months. And the Kirtans there are described as being something that are completely, have never been heard before, and probably in the material world will not be heard again. And there were 3 singers there, the 3 Ghosh brothers, Mukunda, Vasudev, and now I'm blanking out. The 3 Ghosh, anyone remember that? Govinda, thank you. Thank you, Namrasji. Govinda, Mukunda, and Vasudev Ghosh. These 3, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada writes that these 3 brothers were actually expansions of Srimati Radharani's love. And so they were divine beings imbued with the mood of Sri Radha's love for Krishna. And so these 3 were the sweetest chanters in existence. And so Nityananda ordered them to start Kirtan. And as the Kirtan was going on and everyone's dancing in ecstasy and similar things are happening, people are running up on trees. Some devotees in their ecstasy, they started uprooting trees because, you know, like when you're in a mad Kirtan and someone's like really churning the nectar, you're like running around, you're full of energy, you feel like punching the wall in ecstasy. You don't know what you're doing because you're basically gone crazy with love for Krishna, right? So, well, for me, that's theoretical, but I've seen this happen even in Kirtans that I've been in, some great Kirtans by Indradumna Swami or Sachinandan Maharaj, or by my Guru Maharaj, Radhanath Swami. So some devotees do go into ecstasy. So as this was going on, Nityananda called Raghava Pandit and he said, get me a garland of Kadamba flowers. And Raghava Pandit looked at Nityananda and said, but this is not the season for Kadamba. But Nityananda said, well, go outside in your courtyard and see if there is any Kadamba flowers growing. And so Raghava Pandit goes out, and there was a lime tree that was outside in his courtyard. And the lime tree was covered in fragrant Kadamba flowers. And Raghava Pandit looked at it with like awe, and he took the Kadamba flowers, made a garland, and he garlanded Nityananda Prabhu, and the fragrance of that Kadamba garland spread all over the courtyard, and all the devotees went into greater ecstasies smelling it. Suddenly, devotees could smell a different smell coming from one particular part of the courtyard. And there was a big tree, and it was coming from there. And it was the smell of Damanaka flowers. Now, Damanaka flowers do not grow in Bengal, they grow in South India. And so all the devotees, they came to Nityananda. They said, where is the Damanaka smell coming from? And Lord Nityananda said, because you all were chanting with so much love and so much devotion, Lord Chaitanya himself has come from Jagannath Puri simply to watch this Kirtan. He's personally present because you're chanting with pure love. You cannot see him because at this point he doesn't want to be revealed, but I see him. And he said he's standing there wearing a garland of Damanaka flowers. And the devotees went crazy with ecstasy, even crazier. They offered their obeisances to that tree because they knew Mahaprabhu was standing under that. And Nityananda thus showed his divinity in different ways to the devotees, and he engladdened their hearts with his divinity. It's 8 o'clock. Anand Bihari Prabhu, you run this program, so you please tell me. I've got many more pastimes, but we probably are out of time, yes?
Q&A is my favorite part, so let's go over time.
Okay. So should we go into Q&A then?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Sorry, Adipusha Prabhu. Sorry, we're over time.
Hare Krishna, Yasoda Dulal Prabhu. I was actually wondering, you hit upon briefly that Lord Chaitanya asked Lord Nityananda to marry. and to become a grihasta. And I don't know that much about that part of the story. I was wondering if you could speak more about, like, who did he marry? Like, what was his life like? I'm just curious.
Yeah, he married two sisters, Vasudha and Janava, and Vasudha had 2 children, and Janava had none, and Janava raised them as her own kids. And Namras, Gorkumar, anyone correct me? It's 2 or 3 children. Someone who knows, but Janava Devi is acknowledged as one of the acharyas of our sampradaya, is of one of the great leading teachers. And in fact, on Janava Devi, there is, you can literally have like a 5-hour seminar on her glories. He went and married. Mahaprabhu wanted Nityananda to demonstrate two things. One is because he was an avaduta and he would do things. Initially, he was a monk, he was a sannyasi, and he would do things that ostensibly or externally did not fit the ashram of a sannyasi. Like, for example, people would offer him jewels, costly jewels and ornaments, and he would decorate his body with that. And then some people would criticize, like saying, what kind of sannyasi is this? He's wearing all kinds of, he's loaded down with jewelry and with gold and so on. And also he would act in ways that were contrary to established rituals of, behavior. And so Mahaprabhu wanted to show that, number one, you can do far more preaching and reach far more people as a grihasta. So he ordered him to marry. And plus, by marrying Vasudha and Janava and demonstrating that through the grihasta ashram, he set a model. He established a Namahatta in Kardaha, which is where he was based in Bengal. And the Namahatta has become a model. It's a marketplace of the holy name, literally. It's become a model that has been replicated by ISKCON devotees all over the world. Srila Jayapataka Swami set it up successfully, and now many devotees do it all over the world. It's taken different forms in the West. It might be called Bhakti, not Bhakti Vriksha, Bhakti Vriksha in the West. It might be called community groups in the Bhakti Center, but essentially, it's a model where people come together to cultivate their bhakti. So that's why Mahaprabhu ordered him to take up this ashram. Any other questions or comments? So I did want to touch on one other aspect of Nityananda and narrate a pastime or two in connection with that. So Nityananda is the embodiment of devotee care. So, when we come to Krishna consciousness, it's really important for us to not just be in it for our own sake. Like, I am in this because I want to escape the material world, or I want to get liberated and go back to the spiritual world and serve Radha and Krishna eternally in the spiritual world. In fact, what Chaitanya Leela demonstrates consistently is that Mahaprabhu's instruction is, first drink from the ocean of bhakti that we've been exposed to, or we have been fortunate to be introduced to, and then share with every living entity in some way, shape, or form the process of Krishna consciousness that we've been given. And implicit in that is devotee care. It's really important for devotees to act with each other in a way that uplifts, inspires, and gives hope. If we don't have the old saying that mothers would tell their children, if you don't have anything to say, don't say it. Anything good to say, don't say it, right? And in devotional circles, it's especially important that if whatever we say is going to have an effect of destroying or sapping someone's bhakti, keep your mouth shut. Do not say it, do not imply it, and definitely above all, don't be sarcastic. And we must take these lessons that we hear from Chaitanya Leela and Nityananda Leela and apply them in our own communities and in our own dealings with different devotees. Sometimes devotees do stuff that needs to be corrected, and that must be corrected because sometimes, an action that a devotee takes might harm someone else's bhakti, and then the authorities need to, correct that or keep that person away from the devotional community. And it's unfortunate, but we all come with our own conditioning and our baggage. So that needs to happen. But we should not be the self-appointed correctors of every person that we come across. There is reason, there are mentors, there are gurus, and we can point out if there are egregious examples of something. We should not stay silent if a particular person is harming the devotional community. But in general, we should remember that just as I struggle with certain anarthas, the other person is also struggling with certain anarthas. And I might not suffer from greed that person is suffering from, but I might suffer from anger, right? So that does not make me a better devotee than that person, right? I'm suffering from some other anartha. And be accepting and be kind and practice devotional care. And how Nityananda Prabhu did it to show us. So Maharaj Pratap Rudra, who was the king of Jagannath Puri, he was desperate to get personal audience with Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya, being a sannyasi, he was setting the example that sannyasis do not associate with worldly minded people, and especially kings, because kings by definition have to be engaged in passionate activities of running the kingdom, punishing the offenders, waging wars, defending the territory, and so on. So he did not want to do that. But Maharaj Pratap Rudra was actually a pure devotee. But Mahaprabhu is showing through this example of how it is essential for devotees, especially in the renounced order, to be careful of the association they keep. So Maharaj Pratap Rudra said, if I cannot get Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's personal audience and personal mercy, I'm just going to commit suicide. What is the use of this kingdom? And so he thought like this, and he expressed this to a couple of his associates. When Nityananda Prabhu heard this, Nityananda went to Mahaprabhu and he said, why are you not giving your audience to the king? And Mahaprabhu explained why in his position and so on. So Nityananda said, this person, this king is an actual true devotee of yours. Why don't you at least give me your uttariya, which is the upper portion of the sannyasi cloth? Give me your uttariya and I will send that to Maharaj Pratap Rudra to show that today the uttariya has come, the upper cloth, tomorrow Mahaprabhu's mercy will follow. And Mahaprabhu was very pleased because he actually loved Maharaj Pratap Rudra and wanted to give him his direct darshan. But he was acting in a certain way to increase the intensity of the king's love for him and also to demonstrate many other lessons along the way. So when Nityananda sent the cloth, Mahaprabhu's cloth, to Maharaj Pratap Rudra, Maharaj Pratap Rudra's heart burst with joy and with hope. And he started worshiping. He put the cloth on the altar and he started worshiping the cloth as if the cloth were Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, because it's described that the paraphernalia of the Lord is as sacred as the Lord himself. So it's not that we should treat the paraphernalia as some material objects and only treat the Lord nicely. In fact, anything and anyone connected with the Lord is to be treated with sacredness. So Nityananda showed with this, and then of course, ultimately after Rath Yatra, one particular Rath Yatra, Mahaprabhu did give his darshan to Maharaj Pratap Rudra, and Maharaj Pratap Rudra was able to massage the Lord's feet. The other instance was something I spoke about yesterday. Karl Krishna Das, Mahaprabhu's personal assistant on his South India tour, when he came back, Mahaprabhu said, Karl Krishna Das can go anywhere, but I do not want him with me now anymore. He cannot come into my presence. And the reason was that along the way, Karl Krishna Das had been attracted away from the Lord's service and was attracted by a band of gypsies and especially their women. And he actually fell away from his service despite being with the Supreme Lord. And Mahaprabhu had to go drag him. So instead of being Mahaprabhu's servant, Mahaprabhu had to become Karl Krishna Das's servant. And he went in, dragged him out by his hair. The Bhataharis, the band of gypsies, attacked Mahaprabhu with their weapons. And a memorable battle was had in which the axes and the swords and the knives, which the gypsies were using to rush and try to kill Mahaprabhu, those weapons turned back on the gypsies and chopped off their own heads. And Mahaprabhu was just serenely standing there watching, because Hare Krishna. Someone's put a comment. Thank you, but you should treat every devotee with that sacredness. Thank you so much, and you do. So when Kal Krishna Das and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came back, Mahaprabhu said, "I do not want him around anymore." And Kal Krishna Das had repented by that time. He had momentarily fallen away, but he had not lost his devotional heart and his devotional qualities. But Mahaprabhu was setting an example, and he wanted to glorify Nityananda, that even those Mahaprabhu rejects, Nityananda Prabhu accepts and keeps us engaged in the Lord's service. And so Nityananda arranged for Kal Krishna Das to take Jagannath Mahaprasadam to the devotees in Bengal, especially to Shachi Mata, the Lord's mother, and to narrate the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya on his South India tour to the devotees in Bengal. And as we know, simply by speaking about Krishna or by hearing about Krishna, we are actually with Krishna and we remember Krishna. So Nityananda engaged Kal Krishna Das in this activity, and he spent the rest of his years simply chanting Mahaprabhu's glories. He did not go away. And Nityananda kept Mahaprabhu's word in the sense that he banished Kal Krishna Das from his presence in Puri, but he kept him engaged in devotional service by giving him a service that nourished him and kept him connected with the devotees. So Angelica had a question.
Yes, Hare Krishna Prabhu. I
Hare
just want
Bol.
to stop you in your tracks because I feel a little bit triggered about like someone's head being chopped off, and I just want to like ask for clarification on that, and how is it seen from a spiritual perspective?
Mm-hmm. So these gypsies, because of time, I didn't go into the whole conversation. These gypsies, they practice very tantric ways, and they would, practice very violent ways of worship, or so-called worship, and they would rob and kill, and they would essentially, I guess we see this in modern day life in communities where free sex is practiced and so on. And so this Kal Krishna Das was attracted to their community for whatever reason, because the living entity always has free will. And when Mahaprabhu went to request Kal Krishna Das to come back, the gypsies ganged up on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and violently attacked him with all their weapons, the knives and the swords and the axes. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, being the Supreme Lord, of course, no one could kill him or even touch him. But these knives and these axes and these swords, they turned around and attacked the attackers. So it wasn't that Mahaprabhu went to kill the Bhattaharis. He went simply to get his servant back. But because they attacked him, they got the reaction of trying to attack the Supreme Lord and got killed. Does that clarify what I said?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was like, well, what about Jagai and Madai, But that clarifies it very much, actually.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Andrea says, were they liberated? I don't know that because I haven't heard that from the Shastra and I don't want to speculate. Vaisheshika Prabhu, one of my gurus, he always says, everything we say must be backed up by Shastra. So we cannot speculate. So now it's 8:15 and I do have to log on to work myself. I mean, I have so many other pastimes that I would love to. Nityananda Katha is just sweeter than sweetness. It's just, nonstop. But please spend the day immersed in Nityananda Katha and just praying to Lord Nityananda. And, let's collectively pray that we all and our family members and our community and everyone can take shelter at the lotus feet of Lord Nityananda and thereby be able to completely dedicate ourselves to Mahaprabhu and attain eternal service to Shri Shri Radha and Murlidhar in the spiritual world. Namras Prabhu says, do you have any recommended chapters and books? If you want to read the philosophy, you can read chapter 5 of Adi Leela, Chaitanya Charitamrita. You can Google Chaitanya Bhagavat on Google if you don't have Chaitanya Bhagavat at home. And there are PDF versions of the Chaitanya Bhagavat that are available for free, because Chaitanya Bhagavat is full of Nityananda Katha. And then the Madhya Leela has some sections the earlier parts of Madhya Leela, like I think around chapter 6 or 7 or something from memory, that have Nityananda Katha in it.
Thank you, Yasoda Dulal Prabhu. Thanks everyone for joining. Yasoda Dulal Prabhu expressed his deep desire to be situated in Lord Nityananda's Kirtan. So let's take this opportunity and bless him to enter Lord Nityananda's Kirtan. Thank you, Yasoda Ji Prabhu. Wonderful class, wonderful Q&A session. Thanks everyone for contributing to this class, for your appreciations in the chat, for your smiles, for your cameras that you're keeping on. Thank you very much. It was nice seeing you this morning. Have a wonderful day. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Lord Nityananda Prabhu ki jai, Gauranga Mahaprabhu ki jai.